What is up, guys? Tech Asian back here again, and today we're diving into more functions and we're learning about how functions can actually return something. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start by reviewing yesterday's lesson and the different things and some things I wanted to add to that. So let's open VS Code first. So one of the things that I was going to point out from yesterday was when we're trying to seek 0. So why can't we just set this current line? So let's hold on. Let me open VS Code functions function folder. Okay. So yeah. So one of the things from yesterday that I was gonna point out was this line right here. So instead of just putting current line and plus equals current line, we could just put plus equals 1 every time. So like down here, how I was doing plus equals 1 up here works as well. So another thing that I was just saying, so the seek, so current line doesn't actually do anything. We're manually inputting what line this is. So we're manually incrementing it. So it doesn't actually, it's not like it has any relationship to the file at all. Like there's no real connection where if you put current line, it'll do something. Instead, this will actually look in the file and then read that specific line. So yeah, and then something else that I was saying was this seek thing. So the 0 right here is telling you that it's going to seek, it's not seeking the 0th line, or it's not going to start in the 0. Seeking 0 means it starts in bytes. So it's going to start with the 0 byte, also known as the first byte in the file. So that's the significance of this seek. Alrighty, so inside readline is code that scans each byte of the file into. Yeah, okay. I'll just cut that part out right there. Alrighty, so let's jump right into today's lesson. Just start by creating a new file. So as I was saying, we're gonna learn about functions that can return stuff. So we've only done so far with these creating functions that perform a certain task by putting in stuff, but we haven't actually got it to print anything specifically. So today we're just gonna put function underscore 3.py, and let's create this file. So def add a comma b. So I haven't actually looked at this lesson today, so I'm just doing this and learning as I go. So let's do this. Not %d plus %d, and then we can say this percent, and then it's going to be a comma b. So this is going to take two arguments, a and b. So this this add function, we're calling it, is going to take an argument a and b, and then it's going to print out the a and b. And then we're going to say return. So it's going to return a value, and then it's going to return a plus b. I'm guessing I'm going to have to put commas, parentheses around it, but we'll see. Maybe I don't. Definition subtract a comma b, and then we're going to print subtracting. So this is actually, I don't think returning anything. It doesn't print anything out, so we don't actually know what's happening right now until we show it later on. So until we print it later on, because this addition right here is just the symbol. It's not actually performing any functions as how we were doing it before in the other, when we were learning about how to do these functions. All right, let's do %d minus %d. My caps lock's on, that's why. There we go. And then we have to define what this is. So A, B, if I'm not mistaken, and then we return A minus B. So let's get this done real quick. And then don't forget that checklist from 2 days ago. Just keep on looking at that checklist, and just make sure you have all the all the things correct. All right. So after we've defined these functions up here, we've got this age, and we're starting to define our variables. And if we're looking here, we're assigning different values down here, this will perform up here, and then print these functions out. So yeah, I still got a little bit more to type in, but we'll get there. So I'm just putting in random values. You can put in more specific values if you want, pertaining to yourself or other things like that. But these are just random values that I've put on here. Alrighty. So we've got this done, and then we use that percent sign and define all the D's in there. So the percent D's, so you got your age, your height, your weight, and your IQ. Okay. And then you print, here is a puzzle. Then you define a different variable. What equals add age, subtract your height, multiply your weight, and multiply, and divide IQ by 2. Okay. So there's that, and then print that becomes, and then we put what, it'll print what, and then can you do it by hand, question mark. Alrighty, I think that's all, and then now we're just gonna run it, and let's see what it prints out. So we can just go up here, because since there is no script value, so we don't have to go directly in terminal, we can just run the whole Python file. And there we go. So there's a lot of lines right here. So let's open up this right here, and let's see what this does. So we'll go line by line and see what each of the functions does and what each of the thing returns. So the first line, obviously it's gonna print this. Obviously we haven't called any of these functions, so none of these will actually print out until we actually call the functions. So for age, we're adding 30 plus 5, right? 30 and 5. So we have 30 up here, comma 5, and then it's gonna first print adding this. So right here, we're calling this function. So it's basically just take this, whatever's in this function, and we're running it. So for age, we're gonna put 30 and 5. A is equal to 30, B is equal to 5. And then it's gonna print out adding 30 plus 5, and then return that value, A plus B. It's not gonna print the value, but it's gonna first print this, and then it's gonna return a value, but it's just gonna keep it in there. So until we call that value, it's not gonna print it. It'll store it as the age variable right there. So for the second one, we're calling height, and height's going to subtract 78 and 4. And then it's going to do the same thing. Store the return a minus b. Store it as the height variable right here. And until we call that height variable, it won't do anything, but it will print this statement in the function. Weight, same thing. IQ is the same thing. We're calling multiplication and dividing. And then right here, we finally call the age, height, weight, IQ, and then specify these variable names, which are going to be holding the integer values. So they will print the thing, but it will also store the return value as the variable, which is pretty cool. So then we get the string printed out right here. So this whole thing, because we're calling it at line 24, and then it's going to print line 26 right here, obviously. And what equals, it's going to add the age, subtract the height, multiplied by the weight, and divided by IQ and 2. So we already have the IQ value. So if we're following what is it called, the PEMDAS or order of operations per se, we're gonna do whatever's inside the innermost parentheses first, right? So it's gonna say divide IQ by 2. So we already stored the IQ value as 100 earlier, and we can check again by checking what our IQ was. So our IQ value is 100. So it's gonna divide IQ and 2. So, but it will also still print this as well first. So it's going to print 100 divided by 2. So what is that? 50. And then it will multiply your weight and 50. So it's going to print this whole weight function out. But we specified the weight. So whatever the weight originally was, so which was 180. So it's going to do 180 divided by 50. Or multiplied by 50. And then it's going to subtract, it's going to add, and you get a negative number because you're subtracting by a larger number than, yeah. And that becomes that. What? Can you do it by hand? You probably could. It's just going to take you a little bit. But yeah, so pretty interesting stuff right here. You got your add, subtract, divide functions. You can do different things. And then our return values, obviously, that's a new thing where it stores that value. And then that value is going to stay there until you write over it. So like at the end, if you print out the new like IQ value or the new weight or height or age value, that's going to change as well. Pretty sure. Because instead of saying you're changing the weight value, you're multiplying the weight by a specific number. Or maybe it won't. I'm not entirely sure. So it's adding the age and then subtracting different things. Actually, I don't think it will it? Let's see. Let's run this whole code, and then if we print the height, just print the height, it should give us 74, right? Let's see. The return value is pretty cool though. Yeah, so it does give us 74. But the return value also stores that value in there, so it stores it as the variable in the variable, I guess, is what it does. So that's also pretty cool. But yeah, another thing that we could do, and if you want to explore this, is what if you wanted to input your own values? So say age, it calculates your age. Say, let's see. instead of like just adding different values and like implementing your own values, remember how we were doing the age, height, and weight thing where the user would input their own values? But let's say we wanted them to put in like 2 different values, let's say. So you could, I assume, put a input value, put input, the input function right there, and then input in here as well. So now if we run it, it should ask for 2 different values. Let's see. So yeah, it's going to say, let's do math with just functions, but then it expects us to put in values. So let's put like 5 and 20. Huh. A number is required, not a string. Oh, okay. Let's rerun this then. So do I just put in one number? Let's put in 10. Let's do it one more time. Let's put 10 and then we'll put, so we'll put like 10, 10. %D, a number is required, not a string. Okay, let's, instead of just putting like 2 values, let's just put 1 value and we'll put the other as like a number. So start debugging. 20. Yeah, it is a number though. %D, a number is required. I did put in a number though. Huh. Alright, not exactly sure what I'm actually doing here. It is interesting. Input, let's put like int like this. So it can only input, it will only input as a number. So let's run this again, because right now it might just convert the number to a string, even though, let's say we want it to do something like that. So yeah, all right, there we go. So yeah, you have to specify that the input is going to be a number, or else if the user input, the computer won't know what the input is, so it'll default to a string, which obviously makes sense because a string would be, it takes in anything. So if you put this in int, which stands for an integer value, then the user can only input an integer value, which is obviously a smart thing to have in there. So if the integer inputs a string, they'll get an error because you can't input a string. And obviously, if you want a decimal in there, so let's say if someone puts a 0.5, you can put a float value, so it will cover decimal values. But yeah, that's all for today. I hope you learned some things today, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.